Recording in progress.
Yeah, leave him muted for now.
Day. Today is the
October 2nd.
October 2nd. I'm going to start with a roll call. Brian Maloney.
Here.
Bill Van Gelder.
Here.
Keisha Asher. Here. John Lundstedt.
Here.
Whoa.
Thomas Oliver is not here. Suzanne Bach, I'm here. Neil
You got it.
Papievs.
Here.
Was that right?
No.
No. I'll get it one of these
We
days.
even practiced.
I know, I gotta go home.
We don't want to
Work really hard on that. Okay. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the, let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so I'd like to motion for approval of the meeting agenda.
I'll motion.
I'll second.
All right. Maybe people have looked at the past meeting minutes. If you haven't, I can give you a minute to do that. Otherwise, if we're ready to move on, I'll look for a motion.
I'll motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any public comment.
We do not have any public comment tonight.
Yay. All right, so I guess we're moving on. Unfinished business.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I even get into the agenda, there's something really important I need to do, and that's introduce Kathy. Those of you who were at last meeting, I think Brian might be the only exception. Kathy's our newest member of Public Works team, is going to be helping me out with MTAC. She's amazing. She is going to be helping us a lot on the capital project delivery side, and also helping me as Emily and I were a tag team on MTAC. It'll likely be Kathy and I moving forward. So you'll be seeing more of her. City staff updates and other committee discussion real quickly for you. The important date right now for City Hall staff is Crabapple Fest on Saturday. For those of you who've lived in Milton for a long time, you're probably aware of it. Big event right outside our front door here. We close Crabapple Road, bunch of arts and antiques types of little, what am I thinking of? Tents and businesses, booths. Come set up all day Saturday. We'll be closing the road tomorrow. Good event for the kids. We do some inflatables out here in City Hall parking lot. We have a really neat, I think we started last year, a kind of a kids business entrepreneurial little section portion of Crabapple Fest that I thought was pretty cool. I was pretty impressed by them. As well as food trucks and booths and all that type of festival fun stuff. Kathy's helping us out on AV. That's okay. I'll keep talking. Item B, blueprint code revisions. We are making progress on that. We hope to have that in front of council at our second meeting here in October. So that'll be October 20th as a first read with an approval vote on the first meeting in November, which I believe, I'm checking my calendar right now, is November 3rd. So we'll be, as we finalize that, we'll be updating you. I do not think it's worth your time to come to the first meeting. When we do first reads, it's 99% of the time there's no discussion. They just approve the first read, and any discussion and any dialogue we're going to have about the recommendations that are coming from you are going to happen at the second meeting.
So the first date is October 20th, and then the second
first read
one
would be October 20th, which is our second October meeting. If that goes well, the final vote would happen at the first November meeting, which is November 3rd.
Thank you.
And item C is elections. So why are elections important for us? If you may recall, each of you are assigned to a mayor or a council member, and elections every 2 years can have repercussions as far as your membership here on this committee. So what that means, we have 3 elected officials running unopposed, John with Mayor Jameson, Keisha with Juliet Johnson, and Neil with Jen Jacobitz, or not Neil.
Brian Dolan?
Brian, with Brian Dolan. So I do not think it's needed for you to reach out to your council members at this point because our city clerk's going to be doing that for us. But I would expect to be contacted likely in November just to make sure you're still interested in serving and making sure that you want to continue on. You would actually need to be reappointed at a city council meeting for us in January, if that's the case. Brian, I'm not sure if you've met Brian Dolan.
Not yet.
I'd expect him to reach out to you probably in November when the city clerk gives him kind of the lay of the land as far as you're not his only potential appointee. He's going to need to reach out to his planning commission rep and all that and work through that in November and December. And then Neil, one of two things will happen. Either Councilmember Jacobus will win and you'll need to decide whether you're interested in serving another 2 years with us, or he will not, and we'll be waiting for the new council member to decide whether he wants to put in his own person or whether he wants to appoint you and continue serving. Both situations have happened in the past, sometimes even with a turnover in council member. The new incoming council member keeps a lot of the same appointees from the previous one, and there's no change there. So we'll just need to see.
Okay.
So that's that. Next item is where the dialogue is going to be tonight. Thanks to Kathy for putting a lot of this next item together for me. So last time, most of you were here. Brian, you were absent. Last time we had a lot of discussion on where we go next as far as how answering the question, how do we want to spend that $3.5 to $4 million of funding that's already dedicated towards sidewalks with T-Splost, taking into account what the blueprint currently shows, our recommended additions that we're in the process of bringing through code, the feedback that we got towards those revisions earlier this year, which segments were supported, which ones weren't, and then some of the requests and discussion we had last time, which focused on two items specifically. One, trying to gather input from the high schools specifically focused on cross country, and are there any segments that we could bring forward that would help their operations out? And then two, are there any key loops or areas where we already have an active population using the facilities where we have a short segment that could provide them a 2 to 3 to 4 mile loop that they could use as a loop? Are we good on IT? Oh, you're going to flip me over. Yes, let's go ahead and do that. So you'll be able to see this on your screens now. So I'm going to go through this. Stop me when you have questions. This is a lot of information all at once, kind of fire hose style at you. So I'm not expecting a lot of, honestly, answers or direction tonight. Anything you have, Kathy and I will be taking, but ultimately this is something that if we want to table and kind of lock in next meeting, that's perfectly fine. We'll just see how where the consensus is and how this goes. First slide you see on the screen, these are the changes that we're getting ready to finalize for the blueprint. The blue lines are the current map. The pink lines are what we're adding. And the second map, we've talked about this before. It's a little bit difficult to read, but we took this into account also when we're making our recommendations on future slides. The pink lines you see are where we have existing sidewalks. The black lines, which are difficult to see, are where we have the trails. We took the blueprint map, we tried to identify areas that are kind of already spoken for, that we wouldn't want to prioritize as spending a lot of money because there may be a project already in the pipeline, there may be a project that the state's looking at. It may not need priority and a focus for us at this time, and those black circles are where those projects are that we identified as far as staff. Working from left to right. We know 140 is going to be widened. We wouldn't want to spend money on anything that could be torn out by the state DOT widening over on the left. They'll also likely build a trail for us, likely on one side or the other along 140 on our segment anyway. We have an intersection improvement at 372 at Batesville, likely a roundabout at that three-legged intersection. That will likely include some of our sidewalk gap connection there on 372. We have a planned project for Birmingham Park connection up towards that part of the city. We're looking at pedestrian improvements along Red Road from Freemanville to Hopewell. We're starting design on that very soon with construction in a couple of years. And then we have all of our projects over in the Deerfield area. We have the Big Creek Greenway connection. That's the trail on Cogburn and Webb that we've talked about several times. That construction will start very soon, likely early next year. We're currently hiring our contractor for that. We'll be widening State Route 9. And we're looking at a short-term improvement through working with the Crooked Creek HOA to provide them a short-term gravel connection from their entrance on 9, on their side of 9, getting down to Publix near where the Bethany intersection is.
Can you go back one slide to the exit? Yeah. So on this, you're saying all the black is existing trail, all the red or pink is existing sidewalk, right?
Yes.
No. I think it's like bluish black.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, more blue.
This map is difficult to decipher, but it has a lot of good information on it. We took the blueprint map. We divided it into potential locations for projects on the right. So we're going to dive into each of these on a separate slide. But ultimately, the staff recommendation and what we wanted you to start considering tonight is a bunch of projects that we would be able to deliver in that $4 million range from A1 all the way down to K1. And we're going to be talking about each of those individually. The segments themselves are in green on the map. Green is a potential location with you'll see the labels. A1 is this green line here. A2 are those two green lines moving around the map. The yellow are areas of high use that we're trying to connect to and bring people to ultimately. And the blue are those projects that are already in the pipeline that we can take into account as for our sake finished that we're bringing again people to. The example of that being the loop around Milton City Park and Preserve. The trail that we built a couple of years ago is that yellow line coming from the parking lot down, and it currently dead ends. We're currently in construction on phase 2 and phase 3 of that, which will pick up where my cursor is, extend it around the other side back to Dinsmore with a sidewalk along Dinsmore to complete that loop. So the yellow is currently in place. The blue is spoken for and will be in place very soon. This shows looking at the blueprint map recommendations and how the public survey looked as far as number of supporters and which segments were popular. It ranked those from top to bottom in number of supporters. We looked at each of these and we focused on the 3 in yellow, E, I, and C. We thought those had the best chance for providing benefits, fitting in budget, and didn't conflict with something else that was already kind of in the works in that area. You'll see that as we move forward. Starting from here, we're going to be going into each of the individual projects. So we're going to have a little bit of a picture to show you what the existing conditions look like, a label here, and then some facts about each sidewalk. I'm not going to read everything on the slide to you at this point, but you'll be able to have this information for you to study when you get home, potentially go on some field visits and see things. What Kathy and I are trying to do on each of these slides is to explain why a segment may be easy and relatively inexpensive, and to explain why other segments may be difficult and significantly more expensive. Yes.
Can you go back one slide and then go back to the other side? So we're looking at E41, I24, and C23. Now, can you go back?
Bingo.
Yeah,
Yes.
will you go back one more, please?
Yeah.
So
okay,
E
I wanna
was
see-
the segment along New Providence that we've talked a lot about. I was the connection from Red going up to MCPP. And C was the connection from Freemanville coming down to the other end of MCPP. So C here, I
Wait, just go-
here,
What
just
is
go
E?
one- A little bit slower.
and E
Sorry.
is here.
Okay, E.
E is the continuation of the asphalt trail along New Providence heading east.
What is the 41?
Oh, sorry. The 41 is the number of votes that supported
Oh,
it
okay,
as
okay.
far as the survey
I see.
responses.
Okay.
Okay.
So we have E there. C is, just, can you highlight C?
C is coming down from Birmingham, linking Birmingham along Freemanville.
Yep.
Both to White Column subdivision is here on the left, and MCPP and Dinsmore Road is here on the right.
Okay.
So quick question on E, over on Birmingham Highway, there's a little sliver of blue on this map, but then you've got the green is what we're proposing as like kind of low hanging fruit to create a loop, right?
Yes.
What happens with that? Can it accelerate? I mean,
So the blue, this where my cursor is, the blue
Yes.
represents that intersection project that we're going to be starting design on relatively soon to build a roundabout at Batesville. Ultimately, that's likely going to include some pedestrian facilities within the limits of the project that we would then be able to expand upon heading either likely north to start looking at D getting up to Wood Road. So the intersection is going to bite off a little bit of that segment D.
so that segment D right there is not completed right now. It's just projected, right?
Correct.
Okay.
It's one of the segments that we're proposing to add to the blueprint that we received support for.
So even if E was completed,
Mhm.
it still wouldn't make a loop up to Wood.
Correct.
Without
Yeah, to
D
do
being
to do
completed.
this loop, you would need D and E both.
Okay.
So again, I'm not going to read everything on the slides. This is a lot of information. You'll see that we have a picture for you, a label for each of these segments, an approximate length. We put some assumptions in here because I know we would want to talk about it as far as whether we were thinking surface type, asphalt or gravel or concrete. And with those assumptions come cost. Connection A1, you see the information on the screen. This is roughly 1,000 feet of new sidewalk that because we're in the area of curb and gutter and concrete, we would continue the concrete. Approximate costs, it's relatively flat. We would need curb and gutter to continue to match what we're receiving from the roundabout at the crossroads. And we would also likely in this case include a crosswalk across Birmingham Road to get to the side where the park and the fire station are.
Is that crosswalk figured into that 230?
Correct. And that crosswalk is pretty insignificant compared to the cost of concrete.
And do we really need to extend that curb and gutter? I mean, because it seems like you could just fade that and then,
For cost consideration, we assumed we would. If we worked into design, we'd do everything we could to not. But we know that the more costly option is going to be including it. And we, as engineers, just wanted to be conservative in worst case.
do we want to talk for a minute about surface?
So I think one thing we talked about the other meeting, or really the last couple of meetings, is there a way to kind of stair step the surface process? So can we go in with like a trail, a gravel, whatever is the most economical? If it's getting a lot of utilization, then we have more, graduate to more of a hard paved surface, or people may, in fact, decide that they like the gravel. But then we had the discussion around if it's utilized by families pushing strollers, does that impact the usage? And
Well, with previous trail committee years ago, when we looked at the gravel trails, if it's installed properly and compacted, then the strollers really shouldn't be an issue. The problem gets to be wear and tear, erosion, all of that. I mean, this is relatively flat, so if you can try that concept, that's great. I think about maintenance because that gravel section in front of Birmingham Falls, and I was just running on that the other day, it's stabilized, Mother Nature. I mean, it's pretty overgrown. But, I like the idea because, it makes a lot of sense. I think this area is going to have a lot of growth. And my only thing is just, I think that if we're going to hard surface anything, the asphalt is a much better option than the concrete.
This point that says needs curb and gutter to match intersection, so that's the intersection of Birmingham and Freemanville, that's just,
So there's a sidewalk coming from the roundabout at Crossroads heading west towards the
Yeah.
fire station and the park.
7 acres.
That's
Yeah,
where
yeah,
yes, across the street from the restaurant.
Yeah.
That sidewalk already exists. So we were thinking to continue that sidewalk to the park where the fire station driveway is. Worst case, construction cost wise, we would continue that curb and gutter and that concrete sidewalk to a crosswalk. And then we'd transition to another service when we get into the park. Brian, Neil, I completely agree with you. It would make sense in a situation like this to err on the side of gravel to start, and then thinking after 6 months, after 12 months, if we get significant use, then stair stepping into some other surface, whether it's asphalt or concrete. From staff wise, as long as we build the gravel correctly, and we've learned how to do that over time, that makes a lot of sense to us.
And is there a reason why you chose that side of the road?
Yeah, I wondered that too.
Kathy, do you remember why we chose that side of the road?
Just that side because the existing sidewalk is on there and you can see how flat the shoulder is. So it wouldn't have many obstructions. I don't know if you can hear me. It wouldn't have many obstructions as far as installing it. And you got a good bit of right of way. So it would be a pretty easy build.
I don't think we have sidewalk in front of 7 Acre. I don't think we have sidewalk in front of 7 Acre. That
No.
may be why.
There's not.
Probably
there
mainly
was not.
parking lot, right? And
Extending-
the parking lot runs to that.
Extending the sidewalk on the other side of the street versus building a new sidewalk on the 7 Acre side would be more
Well, and then you
difficult.
still need to add a pedestrian crossway, like crosswalk to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, my only thought was, does that create more of a loop if we put it on the 7 acre side? And what I've seen on a greenway, when you have like a parking lot or something like that, they just stripe it. And so that kind of marks that. For the 7 acre people, if you got people walking by, that's great for business. They can pop in there, have lunch, a drink or this or that, or, they could,
We can absolutely look at that. If the 7 Acre owner supported that, that would help us a lot. I agree with you that I've seen examples of that. And I've seen just through the years, I've seen property owners and business owners who like that. And I've seen business owners and property owners who don't like that. So it's something we can absolutely look at.
So was Matilda's part of that too?
yes.
Because Matilda's would be, and it does create some walking traffic.
I don't get up to that side of the city as often as I should. I think the more narrow, more difficult section is going to be the 5 acre property. I just think in my head, there's less room there to put in a sidewalk. There may be an opportunity to continue it through Matilda's. There may be an opportunity to bring it
Yeah.
back to the road once we just get through that first 100 feet, couple 100 feet of that critical area.
I think the crossing right now goes like 7 acres and then it goes into their parking lot.
Mhm.
And then obviously turns into gravel. But with Matilda's there, I wonder if you could, like you said, loop behind these homes and go straight to the park. I mean, depending on who owns that property, I don't know.
We'll look at that. That's a good idea.
But we talked about that one time about having that gravel extension from the park to 7 acres, to the intersection there.
And that's what we're considering is kind of a spoken for project. This would come off that gravel path into the park from that point back to where the sidewalk ends, currently coming from the roundabout. So moving forward, A2 is now east of Publix. So this is on Birmingham Road between Crossroads and Freemanville. There's 2 relatively short gaps along the south side of Birmingham Road that we would plug. approximately 1,400 feet, approximately $300,000, relatively flat, relatively easy. We'd have to look at a crosswalk location. We'd have to avoid a water line, trying to avoid fences. But you see pictures on the screen.
Doesn't the city own that green box on the screen?
Correct. That's city-owned property. Yes.
And we don't utilize that at all now, except for a few events a year.
A few events a year. I'm not completely plugged in on what the future of that would be, but it's call it a passive park right now.
So residents have access to it if they want right
Correct. There's a gravel parking lot towards the southern end of the green area with a driveway
now. Mhm.
that you can use for walking a loop or other things.
Yeah, that was one thing I was wondering is if we cut a small gravel or dirt trail system around the perimeter of that property.
I believe some of that already exists.
I hadn't been on it, so I don't know.
I just honestly don't remember offhand. I know at one time there was some discussion on putting in some equestrian related amenities to the gravel parking lot, thinking that horse trailers and things could use just the open grass space. But I'm not sure where that is in status and whether that's happening relatively often or not.
Okay.
Connection C comes south from where we were just talking about. Freemanville from Birmingham Road. It would connect to the White Columns public entrance, which is where my cursor is right here, as well as coming down Dinsmore for a short segment to connect to the driveway where Milton City Park and Preserve is. So you'll notice this is one of our more difficult segments. We're over $1 million for this cost out the door for design right away in construction. It would be a great amenity to connect to White Columns with all the homes there. It is a long segment of almost a mile long. Several areas of grading. We'd have utility impacts. This is one of our more complicated segments that we'd be looking at.
Well, and that would only make sense if we completed the other two projects that we just talked about leading up to this to then get them all the way over to Birmingham Park.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, but Nix Road is that little blue line, I believe, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So it would connect
That's fair,
people
yeah.
up to Nix and they can go down that way. And then that also connects them up to that property on the end. So I think
And if Brian, you
connects
know
them to
better
the
than me,
Milton
if
Park.
Yeah.
Nix is one of our gravel roads that's used pretty heavily as far as walking, it would probably make a lot of sense to do some kind of crossing treatment there as well.
Oh, so that would be on the opposite side from White Columns.
So when we look into design, we'd look at both sides. Just from a preliminary concept level, we feel like the side opposite White Columns on the east, on the MCPP side of Freemanville would be the easier of the two to get from Birmingham to Dinsmore. Yes.
We're probably too late to have that development put in their section of the
Yes.
map.
C1 is that short segment from Freemanville over to the entrance of MCPP. And then C2 is that short segment from Dinsmore down Freemanville to White Columns public main entrance. Segment E is one of the popular ones we've talked about many times, continuing the asphalt trail along New Providence, coming from the big roundabout at 372, another block over to Freemanville. Approximately 3,000 feet, approximately $700,000. Makes all the sense in the world, given how popular New Providence is. We would continue New Providence asphalt. That makes a lot of sense. Grading would be required. We'd have at least one HOA that we'd be working with. We also have a cemetery on the south side. You can barely see it in the picture where my cursor is, which means we may need to choose whether we interact with that or with some of the subdivisions on the north side. It's going to be difficult either way.
And one of the concepts we talked about years ago in the trail committee was that if you come across something, big tree or something right there, don't cut it down, but maybe you split the trail around it. Maybe if it's decided that, okay, the graveyard sides decide to go, maybe instead of, 6 or 8 feet, it kind of comes down to a 3 or 4 foot wide thing, and it almost becomes a little sign of respect too, if you're on that trail and, kind of acknowledging that. So I personally don't think we have to be that rigid and say, okay, we need, 8 or 10 feet the whole way. We need to be sensitive to some possible
I agree.
things.
Go ahead, Neil.
Well, again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, pun intended here. The point is to find a loop.
Mhm.
This still doesn't give us a loop. Granted, it gives us a connection to an existing sidewalk on
Mhm.
New Providence.
Mhm.
Did we look at, and I'm sure you probably did, so if we went from Wood to Birmingham Highway, went north on Birmingham Highway to Nix Road back to Freemanville, south down Freemanville to Phillips Circle.
That's gonna be a big one down Freeman.
So you're looking at this.
I'm just trying to find a loop.
Well, but I also think on that E though, I mean, gosh, you have so much of that beautiful asphalt and that's so beautiful there. When you bring that over, that does open up the ability for those people to even take their kids to Summit Hill if their district there. I mean, and then from
Because you have
Summit,
that sidewalk crossing Freemanville and Providence
right?
that goes to Summit Hill right
Right.
now. We just try to accelerate the Birmingham Highway from Providence up to Wood Road project, because then that does create that loop. But you still are going to have a little piece on Freemanville, I guess, that you'd have to connect.
Yes.
Unless you just went all the way, like Wood Road, go down behind Summit Hill.
Down Brittle to that makes sense. Yeah.
Or I'm thinking not going all the way to Brittle, but going behind the school. The name of the road that
Summit Road.
is behind the school, is it Cowart?
The Summit and Brittle connect into each other. Cowart's that little road that you can't
Mhm.
drive. I mean, you can drive it, but it
But
has
you
that.
can
Yeah.
walk. And then that takes you back to the sidewalk in front of Summit Hill,
Mhm.
Hill all the way across to where we were just talking about, in front of the church, right?
Mhm.
And to Triple Crown. And then Batesville, that's gonna be a roundabout at some point. And then you just kind of go back to your potential, sidewalk in front of Rush, soccer fields, going north on Birmingham Highway, and then you're back up to Wood Road,
Yeah. I mean,
all the way across.
the only thing I'm thinking, so on Birmingham Highway, they already have a trail system cut in, like very rudimentary trail system cut in that comes out of Wood Road up to Birmingham Falls, past Birmingham Falls up to White Columns.
Yep.
That cannot cost that much money to do something similar going south.
But that was that original gravel trail that was put in.
And it's just kind of
That's
aged
that
over
was my
time.
point. Yeah.
But it's still, I mean, it gets used all the
I
time.
know.
I use it every day, but
Stable. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm wondering. Is there like an opportunity to do that that's not a massive
Absolutely.
cost?
If we want to focus on where my cursor is, kind of this
Loop.
as the loop, we would need to prioritize D, we would need to prioritize E, and then segments along Freemanville to get back to Wood Road.
And really,
then
you
we-
just have
and
to
then
get
we
to
use
that
wood.
first entrance of Phillips Circle. So the south entrance of Phillips Circle connects into Wood Road.
You're correct. We'd only need to bring it to Phillips Circle, because
Yeah.
then we'd use Phillips to get to Wood.
But I also think we gotta be careful and not be totally stuck on loop. I mean, because if I'm out running, I'm interested in distance. Okay, how long can I go? I'm gonna have to spin around at some point and head back.
So that's what we were saying. That loop right there that we just talked about
Mhm.
will probably get you 4.5 to 5 miles, if not more.
I'll tell you
Yeah.
right now.
Look at
Since
this,
since
real time.
Birmingham is a state road, though, when that baby gets widened, then the state will put in that section. So,
Well,
4.7.
372 is never going to be widened.
oh really?
140 is going to be widened. Milton's political position for years has been we would prefer 140 widened. Right now, at least, I can't imagine 372 ever being widened in my lifetime.
Yeah, the traffic's getting crazy. I spent like almost 35 minutes on red just waiting to turn onto Freemanville. Crazy.
So Neil, that loop would be 4.5 to 5 miles.
Pretty good guess there, huh?
And that's what I've drawn on the screen. That's correct me if I'm wrong. That's basically what we're talking about, correct? We're doing,
But I mean, Keisha had a good point too. It doesn't necessarily, you can bypass the Freemanville section if that's complicated and take it across Phillips Circle across to
In front of
Summit, because that goes into another existing gravel system, and take that to Cowart, which is a road, but it's minimal traffic.
Actually a
It kind of
trailhead.
just go around Summit Hill School down to Providence.
okay.
There is a sidewalk in front of the school all the way to that street. Yeah, I've seen people walking.
No, there is. There's a sidewalk from Cowart in front of Summit Hill all the way to the roundabout on Providence and Freemanville right now.
So if we're going to be loading the gravel roads, the original intent and design was to have the elementary schools be the trailheads where people would park their cars. There would be trail maps and everything, because living on Wood Road, I mean, it's absolutely crazy sometimes, all the cars. And then the other thing that we need to do is have a little public education, walk on the left.
Right.
Because you've got all these people every which way. And I'm a little surprised that the safety officer doesn't get a little more involved in educating the people. When they're sitting there, I would love to see them out and, just, beautiful day for a walk,
I mean, we should easily be able to create a nice looking instructional plaque at that parking area on Wood.
Yeah, but my point is that especially expanding something like this, we have to develop those trailheads. I mean,
You just won't be able to use it during school
What
time.
about the Summit, behind Summit Hill? There's parking behind Summit Hill.
Yeah,
And you would
That's on
take
C.
that road,
yeah. And so, I mean, basically,
and that would be your trail.
the city needs to establish an agreement with the school for use of that.
I was just going to ask that. Yeah. If that's
So-
even, are they okay with it? Are we allowed?
The city has to. have
We can
a-
investigate.
It is Cowart, right
Yeah.
there.
So you just take.
You
Summit.
guys always love acronyms. I think, is that a ROU, or I can't remember what that is, that the
Um,
school.
6 mile loop. That's
It could be one of two things. It would either be an MOU or an IGA.
Yeah, 10-4.
IGA are those, IGAs are the contracts that governments use to usually talk about who's funding what. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily have to be a contract. It could be a verbal understanding of what they're giving us permission to and what we'd be doing as far as maintenance.
Brian, another good idea because I hear what you're saying on we need to have designated parking that also alleviates
Right.
traffic and congestion on Wood.
Because I'll have
Rush.
people park right in front of our,
You
Yeah.
probably come home to a parking lot.
and I come home and say, oh my gosh, what a gorgeous day. I'm in to be out and stuff. And I just say, it's a multi-use trail. If I could trouble you to please park, here or up at the school just for the safety of everyone else using the road, and
We also have Rush, which is a massive chunk of land. And the only time that's being utilized is during soccer. But if it's off soccer hours, it already has a massive existing parking lot.
Yeah.
And that can if we run into issues with the schools agreeing, because
But it's privately owned, right?
Yeah.
Rush is privately owned, so there's liability, I guess, if you allow people to park.
I think I would argue you have much more liability on letting anyone onto an elementary school that's not there to visit the school or have, as someone with children in elementary school right now, I wouldn't want random people parking at Birmingham Falls.
And using that trail.
They'd probably have restrictive hours.
Yeah, that's what I think we'd do. But, if it's outside of school hours, which isn't that long anyway, and it's probably low traffic or low usage time, that makes a lot of sense.
Neil, we've got examples around the city of where we've been able to create those agreements and have good cooperation and absolutely everyone supporting it. And then there's been other cases where there's not. So every school's different. It's going to depend on, and I don't know Summit Hill very well, ultimately where their fence is, where the parking lot is the parking lot near right of way, is the parking lot obviously within their school. It's a good enough idea that we're going to investigate. I'm just not sure what that answer is going to be.
You know, another possible thing could be the church.
That's what I was just thinking, that
Yeah.
church is,
Opportunity for conversion.
I like this. But the good news is that we have an option at just under 5 miles and right at 6 miles,
Mhm.
where a good percentage of that is already
Is that
existing.
boundary generally where we want to focus our efforts on?
So can we see what the cost you had laid out, the different parts?
So I don't have every segment on here costed because we didn't specifically look at that length on 372. But if we go back to the presentation, we talked about E.
Yeah, which is
so-
700,000.
So E1 were those two segments, two short gaps west of 372, and then this long line towards Freemanville. And then E2 being something we wouldn't do.
No, you wouldn't have to do
We
E2
wouldn't
because
do
you already,
E2. We'd hopefully leverage an
existing
existing
sidewalk,
sidewalk that's already there east of Freemanville
Yep.
to get to Cowart.
yep.
What do you
Then-
do about Cowart though? Because Cowart, I don't think has a sidewalk, but it is, people walk on it.
We'd have to look into it. I
It's
know
not a
there's some
heavily-
history on that.
Okay.
I think there's a gate there that prohibits vehicle access. Whether it's similar to Brian's point earlier, whether we can treat it as a city-owned gravel road where we expect people walking in the road and that's okay. I don't have all those answers right now. I'm just gonna have to investigate.
Especially since that road is closed, a possible opportunity if we have people parking on Cowart. And I don't know, I mean,
They already do that to access Summit and Riddle.
but the city could just make a roundabout, or a gravel circle there to allow cars to turn around if they need to, as opposed to using people's driveway or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Suzanne, to your question, if the sentiment from the group is we want to focus on that boundary on the screen, we can absolutely do that within our budget. The question would be, if you want to spend the entire $3 to $4 million, what we do in addition to this? Because this is less than the 10 segments on the right of my screen that we had talked about before that would reach $4 million.
So I was writing down how much each of the segments cost as you're going through it. We
Mhm.
didn't get up to segment D. How much is D?
So D, we didn't prioritize.
Okay.
We focused on, we broke E into E1, which is in the tune of $300,000. And then E2, we wouldn't be talking about anymore. Depending on material type, we're in the $600,000 neighborhood. I'm going to have a table at the very end that's going to show you
Oh,
all
okay.
these numbers.
Yeah.
Real quickly, just to finish the presentation, H1 continues sidewalk along Providence from Bethany down to Providence Park. This is a popular request from residents that we wanted to at least show you. It's very expensive and difficult, as you can see, based on the price and some of the text that we have on the screen. That bridge crossing being one of the difficult parts.
But that would be a high use. A lot of people would get to that.
Absolutely.
And so the other question I have for you is, when you throw out numbers like that, is that like my wife telling me, oh, it's only this amount, and it's, twice that amount?
We're
or-
engineers, so we're conservative by nature. That number is inflated to
No
make
offense,
sure
ladies.
that 2 or 3 years from now, I'm not saying it's double the price. That's the best guess we can give you as far as what it would cost to hire an engineer to produce the plans, to buy the land, right away and easement we need to build the sidewalk, and to ultimately construct it.
In that H1, then that would also, does that continue? Is there sidewalk to Summit from that intersection at Cooper
No.
Sandy?
It would go to Bethany, and then after Bethany, it's still raw.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
all
there'd
the
still
way up
be
to Cowart.
gaps between Bethany at Providence to get back to Summit. heading the opposite way.
There's another probably quarter mile.
Looking at this gap right here where my cursor is. And then wanted to talk about H2, another segment that would potentially link to trails we're looking at Providence Park. If you're familiar with this area, this is in the neighborhood of where the city purchased land for Passive Park to expand Providence Park. This segment, sidewalk connection on Hopewell, from Hopewell Plantation back to the entrance of Providence Park, relatively short, 1,300 feet at $300,000, would provide link from Hopewell Plantation to access back to Providence through Providence Park.
So is there an existing exit on Providence Park on the back end right now?
Which is, what are you
like,
referring
right-
to as far as the back end?
When I've gone to Providence Park, you go and you park in the little parking lot right there on the front, go down the trail system to the lake. Is this saying that you can leave Providence Park
Out the east side?
out the back side where the lake is? Or do you have to come back up to Providence? I guess I'm just kind of confused with, because this is interesting.
Let me provide you more information on that in next meeting. I'm not completely familiar with this, and with Kathy not being here, I believe that red segment is something that is either currently in place or will be in place relatively soon. So the segment that we'd be talking about, the H2, would just be the portion on Hopewell to link where that exit would be onto Hopewell over to Hopewell Plantation. Last couple segments, going on Freemanville north of Red, connecting to our future improvements on Red. And K. K is interesting. K is Bethany, west of Cambridge High School. This would extend the Big Creek connection that we're currently going to be starting construction on very soon, picking up at where the sidewalk ends along Bethany and bringing it approximately half a mile west over to the roundabout where Painted Horse and Hopewell is. Again, Neil, to your comments earlier, would that give us a loop? No, but would it give us an extension of what we hope is relatively heavily used? I would hope so.
And I mean, I don't mean to like harp on a loop. I think I naturally gravitate towards loops, and it's nice to not have to see the same area twice. But if there are large out and back segments that we can then connect some of those to get to, that 5-6 mile mark, I think that residents will use that as well.
And also one of the other prime directives early on was just trying to, if a child lived within a mile of school, that they could walk to school. If they lived within 2 miles, they could ride a bike. Something like that, I think, has the potential to connect a lot of people to the high school there.
I think when we first started talking about this, we were trying to eliminate, the residents voiced that they wanted to eliminate more of the sidewalks to nowhere,
Correct.
as opposed to the loop. Most residents don't even realize there's not a loop. It was more like my sidewalk stops, but my school's right there.
Yeah.
And so we were looking at more of those like small sections.
And if that is in fact the case, then I think there does need to be a bigger discussion around the surface if you're connecting to a school, to make sure that, it needs to probably be a pretty consistent and a safe surface. If these kids, in a perfect world, kids would ride their bike 2 miles to school. I don't really see that happening.
In a
right now.
realistic world, that's not going to happen very often.
No.
So last slide shows you the numbers that we just presented along the right. So we took a roughly $8 to $9 million project list on the left and more narrowly focused it around where we recommended kind of dissecting those segments into, from A1 all the way down to K1, totaling up to approximately $4 million. What you'll see on the list on the right is this does not include any requests from the schools and the cross-country teams that we had talked about last time. So I reached out, John saw my email this morning. We again tried to press the athletic directors for the high schools through our recreation and parks director to find if there are any segments on their radar that they'd like us to pursue. I did hear back from Cambridge this morning. They asked for the segment along Cogburn that we're starting construction on next year. So that's already taken care of and solved. I have not heard from Milton yet.
I have talked to Corey Keys, and I emailed again with Elle, the cross country, and they were having a meeting a few weeks ago, and she was supposed to let me know from the meeting, but
If there's anything that any of you hear through any of your contacts, please pass it along. But
Sure.
otherwise, I'm not hearing anything
Right.
from the schools.
Okay.
We tried.
Rob, can you remind me, the money we do have, are there statutes of time on that?
No statutes on time, statutes on use. So we need to make sure that the sidewalk has a transportation component to it, ideally within the right of way of a road that it's paralleling. The example of that is it would be difficult to use T-SPLOST dollars to enhance one of the trails in Birmingham Park. But it would be very easy to justify using T-SPLOST dollars to build a sidewalk to get you to Birmingham Park.
Well, I think that's the goal at the end of the day, from when I joined, but it sounds like there's a bigger goal on trying to connect the schools, neighborhoods to the schools so that, students can access the schools via walking, bikes and all that. But I think the other goal is to try to connect the big parks via trail systems as well.
Yep.
There's multiple from Brian's been doing this for longer than I have. But from what I've heard from residents and elected officials, there's multi-purpose. There's the recreation, just want to get out on a Saturday and enjoy being outside. And there's also the, I'm tired of sitting in traffic. I want to provide an option for my middle school or elementary schooler to walk to school safely.
So of these connections that you have the price listed out, does any of these complete those objectives? So like connection K you talked about, it doesn't help really for getting to and from Cambridge, right? So I guess my question is, does any of those either complete a loop or a complete access to schools or something that we know that we can definitively say, yeah, we want to focus on this and how much money's left to go
So
somewhere else?
without going each individual one, if we just work backwards, K absolutely checks that box. K, there's a large subdivision, Bethany Oaks here on Hopewell,
Okay.
that providing this sidewalk would give them a link to not only Cambridge High, but Hopewell Middle, going down Cogburn and both of the private schools
So the brown spot there is completed.
already in place.
All right. So that's okay.
And North Park and then Kings Ridge.
Yes.
Correct.
And it goes, and then eventually it'll connect to the greenway when that's done going down Cogburn, right?
And so the total price you've kind of figured on, is that a concrete cost or asphalt or?
That's worst case. So in each of these slides, we included information on what we were assuming as far as material type. We erred on the side of the more expensive option,
Okay.
concrete.
That's good.
If the sentiment here is we want to go step one, step two, phase it, and wherever we can justify it, start with gravel, thinking that if it gets heavily used, we would go into asphalt or concrete in year 2 or year 3. Those costs are going to come down. We just want to make sure, again, that we're using gravel in a location where we don't, for example, if we were plugging a gap and we had concrete on both sides, it wouldn't make sense to put gravel in between two sections
I
of
agree.
concrete.
Yeah.
We'd also want to make sure, we'd want to at least think through the potential users of the facility. If for some reason we had a segment where we expect bike activity, I would want to err more towards asphalt or concrete than gravel. Gravel, I'm thinking more pedestrian, more equestrian. Concrete, asphalt, I'm thinking more crabapple, Deerfield, potential golf cart, potential bicycle use.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like Providence, that would make sense to have a hard paved surface. Get to Birmingham Highway up to Wood is probably a gravel trail surface because it's going to stay in keeping with what's existing. I also think if you're looking at golf carts and e-bikes and all of that going into, say, something connecting into downtown Crabapple, then that probably does make sense to look at it hard, but it's got to be case by case. I think at this point,
It's absolutely
just,
going to be case by case.
what can we do right now?
Mhm.
So that I get asked the question a lot. You guys have a lot of meetings. What's happening outside of like what's going on with Deerfield? So it'd be nice to be able to say, hey, we actually have some real tangible progress going here. We've got the allotted funds, and this is going to be the result at the end of the day. And it's not going to happen in 10 years.
So I guess it comes back to our two objectives, right? Any segments to close loops? Or two, is there anything we could do for access to schools and
Yeah, points of interest. I mean,
something like
because
that.
the schools, the points of interest, being able to connect the community to those is really the prime concept.
So this will connect two elementary schools.
If I can
on
make a
this one.
suggestion, from what I hear, the consensus, what if next meeting we took a stab at prioritizing the loop we show on the screen and look at what other segments we had already costed out, like K, that does some of the school benefit, and see what we can deliver that still stays within that $4 million mark.
And maybe give us a price range on the like conservative scenario, and then utilization of both hard and gravel surfaces.
Yep, we can look, for example, we can look at this loop and give you some assumptions on point A to point B. This is a slam dunk asphalt trail versus point B to point C makes sense to consider gravel. Neil, from what you just said earlier, I completely agree. This long segment along 372 to get up to Wood is going to be very expensive if we go asphalt or
Can I ask a question
concrete.
about
So
that? So you mentioned agreements with schools, but do we have any agreements with private property to use, like what I'm thinking is instead of going all the way up to Wood Road, up Birmingham Highway, going north up to Wood Road, having Rush Soccer part of the trail or part of it's not a park, but I don't know if we could use it because there are trails on that property.
Okay.
And then somehow, I don't know the property lines, but looping from Rush, in the very back of Rush, is there any way to get to Wood Road?
we can look at that.
The loop would be smaller.
Like
but-
along a creek or something.
We can absolutely look at that. There's examples of that happening in other locations.
Okay.
The risk of doing something like that, and the reason why we generally want to have sidewalks and trails in our right of way is we can control it.
Right.
There would need to be language. Thinking worst case, not that this would ever happen, but 10 or 20 years from now, if Rush changed ownership and they wanted to not allow that, or they wanted to put up a gate or put up something that would
Sure.
prevent people
Or develop
from
it,
using it, or change it into something else. That would be the risk of doing of a public mobility connection like that on land that we ultimately don't own as the city.
And what did you say? She asked a good question in the other meeting about the power line. The power line.
Using the
Space.
power line easement and sewer easement, believe it or not, are very popular as far as building sidewalks through. We'll absolutely look at that. If that's a cheaper, easier option for us to achieve the goal of this loop by using power line easement, absolutely.
Did you say it needed to be on parallel to the road, though? The monies have its certain requirements?
We'll need to look into that. If it were just the segment within a power line easement and we're using T-Splosh, that may be difficult. If I were building an entire loop and a small portion of that
I
loop
see.
happened to go through a power line easement, we may have an easier case.
So we're blessed to have so many potential opportunities.
Complicates
We're
your
tasked
job.
with coming
Narrowing
up
it
with
down.
our priorities for this year with this particular amount of money. What's the time frame? Because we don't want to keep coming up with new ideas. You guys put a lot of work into your priorities, and to Neil's point, hey, people ask, what are you doing? Well, gosh, we don't want to just keep kicking the ball down the road, looking.
The unfortunate part of public works world is that projects just take way too long.
But we don't want to be the cause of that. We want to see.
And that's exactly why we want to be looking at things like Keisha has brought up, things that Neil has brought up. The most difficult, costly, time-intensive part of our projects is the right-of-way acquisition component. If I'm impacting a property owner and putting a sidewalk that impacts their driveway or impacts their landscaping or impacts a tree that's sentimental to them, that typically takes a year to go through that negotiation just for one property owner. We want to aggressively deliver projects, but we also want to follow our elected officials' sentiment for wanting to ultimately take care and be respectful of everyone who we impact for our projects. Public works projects, just by nature, we're controversial. We're always going to be controversial because we're 99% of the time we're having to purchase land or easement from someone in order to build what we need to build to serve the public.
I guess my point is that from what you've given us, looking at the E-connections would connect the asphalt section and kind of complete that Providence. Maybe having to look at a little section to get us over to Summit there. I don't know. I think that's already on sidewalk over on that side.
Mhm.
And so is it worth us to spend the time looking on what it's going to cost for that Birmingham highway route?
This is not working. I wanted to show you an example of what I was.
And this is falcon season, so I'm out looking for the
This is
hawks. And I'll
2016.
tell you that roundabout at Providence, I can't believe the number of vehicles, but I can't believe the number of people who walk on those sidewalks.
Mhm.
I almost caught a hawk there yesterday.
372.
Yeah, in Providence. Yeah, no, it's crazy.
So unless there's any further discussion or any changes, I'd like to suggest next meeting is we take another stab at how to spend this 4.2. And our focus is going to be on how to best spend delivering this loop on the screen,
Mhm.
trying to look at using gravel where we can justify it. And we'll show you some of those assumptions on where we thought it would be a good idea and where we would err towards more of a paved surface. Once we cost out this loop, we'll see what we have left in that 4, and that's where we'll bring in some of these connections that we showed you today, focusing on segments that would connect neighborhoods to schools or neighborhoods to parks.
I still feel, and I'm so sorry, that the main focus needs to be on connecting neighborhoods to schools and points of interest. I mean, and then the loop, to me, I think is a secondary thing, but
So of these potential small connection locations here, no, on the list,
Mhm.
any of them, like if you're saying K1 fulfills that goal and it's a tangible goal that we can say we met our objective of connecting schools to neighborhoods and stuff like that, any of those other ones that would check those boxes so we can narrow down, if we focus on those and then see how much the loop is going to be.
I would argue H2 would connect Hopewell Plantation to Providence Park. H1 would absolutely connect residential area, Cooper Sandy with whatever that will turn into, Passive Park area to homes on that side of Providence. Ultimately with H1 kind of being that connection from Cooper Sandy over to Providence Park. C1 and C2, I would argue, provide connections from White Columns over to MCPP and from White Columns and the residential areas on Freemanville up to Birmingham Crossroads area and the corner of Birmingham and Freemanville that we had talked about previously. And I would argue A2 and A1 provide a connection from the commercial area at Crossroads over to Birmingham Park.
The
And-
K1's the only one school related, but the others to commercial areas, right?
And I think the important thing to remember is that this is this year's budget, and this is a multi-year thing. So, I mean, gosh, if we can connect some of that, then next year we look, and maybe next year we say, okay, great, let's throw this leg in and stuff. But with the limited budget, I think we just got to be careful. And we want to maximize the potential benefit to as many people in the city as possible.
From staff's perspective, we would want to choose segments that we can deliver as quickly as we possibly can and make a noticeable step forward.
And
This will not be one more thing. This will not be our only opportunity for funding sources to build these projects. So next year, completely separate from the $3 to $4 million we're talking about here, we're going to be diving into T-SPLOST project lists. So there's going to be an opportunity for all of you and all of our public to talk about which additional segments we want to build to the tune of potentially $5 to $10 million or even more of our 30 to 40 that we'll be collecting over the next 5 years, assuming it passes.
so of these potential projects that you listed, you had mentioned sometimes it could take up to a year to get buy-in from one homeowner.
Mhm.
Do these potential small connections take into account those areas that have less homeowners that you have that buy-in, or is that? Yes.
We looked at that when we tried to incorporate things like that, things like the topography of stormwater. We tried to do that when we were developing our recommendations for the connections. Kathy, when she was dissecting and dividing the list on the left to the list on the right, looked for opportunities where we could fit the trail within existing right-of-way and not have a negotiation with that property owner.
I'd like to make a motion, we accept staff's recommendations.
Be done.
What would
So I did like just a little bit of a mental math as you were recommending those. And if we took all the suggestions that you had just said, it would eat most of our budget, just doing those potential connections that you mentioned, A1, A2, C1, C2, H1, H2, and K1. So I think we really need to think about what is our objective. Is it, closing loops, or is it focusing on filling in points of interest or schools? And then, and maybe this is what we can knock off now, and then this is our long-term plan for next year when we get more money, or however we want to do it. So,
And we're going to look at whether we're able to check both of those boxes and potentially, look at the loop, look at school to neighborhood connections, use gravel where possible, and see if we can do both and fit it under 4 million.
that'd be great.
I mean, a loop will impact all residents. Connecting schools to neighborhoods, which I totally agree with,
then next year,
impacts
all
the
we have to do
neighborhood,
is look at that
which could have
program.
anywhere from 10 to 50 homes.
Correct.
So, what's
So all of that's
the most
done,
impactful
but the
opportunity
Providence Road section,
within the
that's
budget that we can
key.
work with?
And so then
And
next
it's not
year,
going
the
to
only
take
section
5
is
years
that
of
Birmingham.
negotiating with
Yeah, so that
private
key
property
is
owners
also
to
expensive.
pull it off.
It's got two, yeah.
We almost need a
That's
matrix of all
very
these
major.
options, and then
If
like,
we can connect to that.
how easy can it be done? What is the value? Does it connect
Next year.
schools? So we can see more. I know you got them on the individual ones, but something,
Did a little bit of that. We tried where we could on each of the individual slides.
Yeah.
But yes, I think that's something we can do a little bit more next time.
But so then the other question is, that's Rob.
Thanks, Rob. This is great.
Great.
A lot of good detail.
Great.
Tell council.
I mean,
we're able to
Kathy.
connect.
Yeah. 'Cause
Kathy did 95% of this. Just the guy presenting it.
Well, you're a great
tonight.
leader. You swoop in and take all the credit.
This was great.
How hard would it be to just put like a little star where each of the schools are on the existing maps that we have, so that we can kind of see,
Sure.
and then maybe prominent neighborhoods would be, because I would
Okay.
imagine cutting in front of an existing neighborhood is probably an easier process than a private landowner on that same road. And they probably already have an existing sidewalk at their entrance or some sort of something we could tie into.
Mhm.
It just would be good to kind of understand that picture.
It'll
So what
also
about-
be splashy. It'd be really visible.
Yeah.
And people be like, oh, good, they're doing
Schools
something.
and subdivisions of over 50 homes.
Yeah, just like the triple crowns of the,
Mhm.
you know,
White columns.
White Columns, Triple Crown, like some of the bigger neighborhoods
Okay.
where the schools are, and then we can have a better picture of, you know, if it's a huge neighborhood and then we can connect that to a school, that's very impactful to the city, I think. Assuming that school is in the district of that neighborhood.
That's a key assumption that not necessarily
I
always
mean, I lived in
happens.
a neighborhood that had the division, so, and White Columns also has a division.
Before we adjourn, real quickly, I'm assuming we're going to want to meet one more time before the end of the year. I want to go ahead and look at calendars and try and lock that in. My suggestions was going to be, or working around the holidays, either in early November or an early December timeframe.
When's the November meeting that you talked about earlier?
3rd.
November 3rd?
So the council meeting would be November 3rd. If we wanted to do Thursdays in November, we could either do the 6th or the 13th. I would recommend early November just to avoid Thanksgiving. And then same in December. If we want to meet in December, I would either look at the 4th or the 11th and avoid everyone's Christmas vacation.
I think another meeting before Thanksgiving.
What do the 6th and the 13th look like for everyone?
Works for me.
I'm good.
6 is good.
So I guess you have,
Oh, the 6th is the volunteer appreciation dinner.
Then let's do the 13th.
good call. You had the
I'm okay
discussion
there,
of the
but-
trail prioritization and existing funding plan. You're presenting something October 20th to council.
So we're looking.
Do we need to, we don't really have a set.
There's a motion on the floor.
There is a-
We voted on that blueprint map unanimously. Gosh, I
Yeah.
want to say it was 4 months ago, 6 months ago. That's what I'm bringing forward to
Oh,
them. So I
you're not
don't need
bringing-
any
not
action
this.
from you
Okay,
for October 20th.
There is
We're very late on bringing that forward,
I see.
there is a Parks and Rec meeting on the 13th.
which means, yeah, I'll have to work through that.
I don't
That-
think they start till like 6, but
Typically they're at 6, so option A will be we're over at Community Place. Option B is maybe we meet and just commit to adjourning at 5:30, 5:45 and turn over the room. I'll work through that. I still think going the 13th would be better than going on the 6th.
yeah, agreed.
So the hangup on I think the discussion is what's going to be the cost on that section of Birmingham?
That's the big unknown from my end.
Right.
As well as looking at some of the segments we had already costed out and going towards more of the assumption of what would that number look like if we just assumed we're doing gravel.
And I think that section on Birmingham needs to be like the cheapest option,
I agree.
but,
I think that's the only way we're going to be able
Yeah.
to include it.
and it could be a non-starter. I mean, you could look at it and say, you got to pass 1 million homes.
And we've already got an example of that on 372 today, so we'd be able to justify it that way.
I do have to say thank you for all this work. We know it was a lot.
Great
And
presentation.
yeah,
A
and
lot of detail.
Good.
to you and Kathy, thank
I'm
you.
glad we're making progress.
They get paid.
Hmm?
I said, you guys get paid. Well done.
Thank you.
Not enough.
Yes, thank
We
you.
still need Cambridge High School, to come back again, right, with some more information or,
If their
You said that
AD
was
or
already-
their cross-country has anything other than the segment on Cogburn, I'll bring that to you. But that was ultimately, I got a response from them pretty quickly this morning, and that was the only segment they asked for. Again, if I hear from Milton, I will update you at the next meeting with what their request is, if it's something that we haven't already committed to.
And does this need to be done in block or can you piecemeal? And if everyone says, oh my gosh, yeah, for that piece the school wants, yes, go ahead and start that. I mean,
Hypothetically, let's say in November, I give you a list that everyone loves that we can do in under budget. That's that loop plus a couple of the other segments. we take a motion, vote on that unanimously. I bring that to a work session with council and get their buy-in. And the very next thing is we're going through the procurement process to hire an engineer to design it. That's from now to when we would be hiring the engineer, that's 4 to 6 months in order to start the design of all those sidewalk segments. Yes.
So do we have like a really easy win here to kind of help with some frustrations that the homeowners on Wood are experiencing on maybe knowing that we've been spending a lot of time talking about branding in Deerfield, creating a sign at the parking area on the existing Wood Road area, just being like, we have those little like printout signs that say, hey, if you like this trail, here are some other trails in the area. And I think those are great. But like, if you're utilizing this trail, here are some recommendations on how to be respectful of
We
the
can
homeowners on the
absolutely look
trail.
into that. If we're looking at kind of focusing on what the quick wins would be, the one quick win that we're already, again, we got approval from GDOT permitting today to move forward is that gravel path on 9 from Crooked Creek to Publix. So that will be coming online early next year. That's a quick win. I do not know if any of the other segments we've talked about are as easy as that, where we can just put for that quick win, we have enough right of way that all we're doing is putting gravel down in the right of way and doing some grading. We have 0 properties. We have 0 utilities we're impacting, 0 property owners we're impacting. It's almost a maintenance effort to put that gravel down.
In the meantime, kind of back to your point about the signage, can we put some type of signage on Wood Road, maybe similar to, I think Birmingham Park has some signage, like I don't know if it's like a case or something. I think Providence might too, but just for trail etiquette, basically.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying.
Let me talk with Tom. I'm not completely familiar with what the existing signage looks like.
We need to be careful because they used to have a big like park rules thing that, I mean, no one's going to stand there and watch. It needs to be a very simple sign, walk on the left.
And it needs to look good. It can't be like we just went and printed it out at FedEx Kinko's and
Brian will be up
stapled
there.
it to a tree.
A piece of white paper with Rob's handwriting on it.
Maybe it could include like a really interesting fact of the history of Wood Road. I mean, we're all talking about like,
Dr. Brian
the
Maloney
education.
lives on this road.
Sure.
Got a fluorescent vest on.
That's
and-
right,
Yes.
that's right.
Like QR
No,
code, and they can
but
link
for
to your
safety,
website.
but
Yeah.
for safety, you walk in left so you see the cars coming towards you. I mean, the people walking across the road and, it's like, okay.
Okay.
Cool. Here's your
Thank you
sign.
very much. This
Yeah, no
was
problem.
very helpful.
I'm glad you had, we were debating whether this was going to be too much engineering costs and stuff for you, but
No, amazing amount of
Good.
work. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Good.
All right, thank you, Keisha. Can I have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Neil. I think we're done.
we'll see you November 13th.
Very good.
Right.
Thank you.
That was a lot of work.
Mhm.